The Beckham family feud has just taken a turn no one saw coming. And this time, it's not about fashion shows, documentaries, or missing family events. It's about a future child, a growing silence, and a family quietly moving in very different directions. Because while Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz are openly thinking about expanding their family, the rest of the Beckhams appear to be responding in ways that speak louder than any public statement ever could. At the centre of it all is a revelation that landed like a shockwave. Brooklyn and Nicola have been seriously discussing adoption, not as a distant idea, not as a hypothetical, but as a real, intentional plan for their future and for David and Victoria Beckham, who have always spoken about how deeply family matters to them. This news has reportedly cut deeper than anything that's come before. Brooklyn has made it clear that his focus is now firmly on the life he's building with Nicola. In his own words, he's spoken about peace, privacy, and a future family that exists away from pressure, image, and expectation. And within that future, adoption isn't just a possibility, it's something both he and Nicola are aligned on. They've talked about it extensively. They've spoken about wanting a large family. And crucially, they've spoken about using their privilege to give a child a life they might not otherwise have. But here's where things get complicated, because this potential first grandchild wouldn't just represent a new chapter for Brooklyn and Nicola. It would also highlight just how distant the relationship between Brooklyn and his parents has become. Those close to the situation say David and Victoria have always adored the idea of becoming grandparents. It's something they've quietly looked forward to for years. And the thought that their son could welcome a child into the world, adopted or otherwise, without them having any role at all, is reportedly devastating. And while it may look like every bridge has already been burned, that isn't entirely true. Behind the scenes, there is still one figure, quietly moving between both sides, listening more than speaking, refusing to escalate tensions, and keeping lines of communication open without pressure or ultimatums. It's not someone chasing headlines or public sympathy. It's someone who believes family fractures don't heal through confrontation, but through patience and time. Even now, as adoption plans loom and emotions remain raw, that quiet effort hasn't stopped. What makes it even more painful is how all of this has unfolded. Not through a private family conversation, not through reconciliation, but through public signals, statements and actions that only reinforce how wide the gap between them has become. And one of the most visible signals? Brooklyn's body art. In recent weeks, Brooklyn has quietly but unmistakably removed or covered multiple tattoos that once symbolised his connection to his family. Tattoos dedicated to his father, tattoos honouring his siblings, even references that once marked his identity as the eldest Beckham son. The anchor tattoo that once carried the word dad is now stripped of that meaning. The message, "Love you, bust," David Beckham's long-standing nickname for his son, has faded into something barely recognisable. Other family-related tattoos have been altered or inked over entirely. What remains untouched are the tattoos dedicated to Nicola. For many watching from the outside, it felt like more than a style choice. It felt like a physical manifestation of emotional distance, a rewriting of identity, quite literally etched into skin. And all of this has unfolded while Brooklyn maintains that stepping away from his family has brought him peace. He's spoken openly about anxiety, about control, and about feeling freer since cutting contact. From his perspective, these changes aren't acts of rebellion, they're acts of self-preservation. But while Brooklyn is removing symbols of his past, the rest of the Beckham family appears to be closing ranks. Just days after the adoption discussions became public, David Beckham was seen doing something deceptively ordinary, enjoying a quiet lunch with his mother and his sister. No grand statements, no interviews, just pie and mash at one of his favourite low-key spots, shared with the two women who have been constants in his life long before fame, brand deals, or family feuds. The image was simple, almost understated. but the timing made it impossible to ignore. While Brooklyn looks toward a future that may not include his parents at all, David was very visibly leaning into the family members who are still firmly by his side. And that quiet effort to keep this family from completely breaking apart isn't coming from where most people expect. That steady presence is David Beckham's mother, Sandra Beckham. While public positions have hardened and communication has broken down elsewhere, Sandra has continued speaking to both sides, determined not to let the family fracture become permanent. Those close to the situation say she refuses to take sides, focusing instead on preserving connection, especially with the future in mind. As talk of adoption becomes more real, Sandra's role has taken on new urgency, driven by a simple belief that families shouldn't lose each other forever. At the same time, the wider Beckham household has continued to move forward publicly, even as tensions simmer behind the scenes. Cruz Beckham, the youngest son, recently sparked his own wave of attention with a deliberately provocative social media post promoting his music. The image was cheeky, controversial, and very on brand for a 20-year-old trying to break through on his own terms. What stood out wasn't just the post itself, it was the reaction. Romeo Beckham jumped into the comments with laughing emojis, a small but telling display of brotherly support. In a family where silence has become deafening in some places, moments like that stand out. Cruz's post landed at a time when Brooklyn has accused his family of valuing image and publicity over genuine connection. And for critics watching closely, the contrast couldn't have been sharper. While Brooklyn distances himself from the Beckham machine, the machine continues to operate, promoting music, supporting projects, and projecting unity. Then there's Nicola's side of the family. Shortly after news of the adoption discussions broke, Nicola Peltz's sister shared a cryptic message online. It wasn't explicit. It didn't mention names. But the timing did all of the talking. The post spoke about trusting dreams, about believing in what's been placed in your heart for a reason. For many, it felt like quiet solidarity, a subtle show of support for Nicola and Brooklyn as they navigate a deeply personal decision under intense public scrutiny. Nicola has always been close to her family, and unlike the Beckhams' current dynamic, her side appears united, present, and firmly supportive of the couple's choices. And that contrast matters. Because at the heart of this feud isn't just a disagreement, it's two very different ideas of family, loyalty, and independence colliding in public. Brooklyn and Nicola are looking ahead, talking about children, adoption, and a life shaped on their own terms. David and Victoria, meanwhile, are facing the reality that the family they built so carefully may no longer include their eldest son in any meaningful way. And yet, not everyone has given up hope. Behind the scenes, there is reportedly one family member quietly trying to keep communication alive, someone who understands both sides, someone who believes that even now, bridges don't have to stay burned forever. That effort hasn't been made public, it hasn't been announced, and it certainly hasn't worked, at least not yet. But it exists. And as Brooklyn and Nicola continue to move toward the possibility of adoption, the stakes inside this family feud have never been higher, because once a child enters the picture, everything changes. And the question isn't just whether the Beckhams can reconcile, it's whether they'll even be invited to try. And that's what makes this moment so critical. Because adoption isn't just another headline, it's not a temporary phase or a symbolic gesture. It's a permanent step toward building a family, one that will redefine roles, relationships, and boundaries forever. For David and Victoria Beckham, that reality is reportedly sinking in fast. Those close to the couple say the idea of Brooklyn becoming a father, especially through adoption, has stirred a complicated mix of pride, heartbreak, and fear. Pride because they've always wanted grandchildren. Heartbreak because they may have no place in that child's life. And fear because once a grandchild exists outside their reach, reconciliation becomes exponentially harder. Unlike past disagreements that might fade with time, a child creates permanence, birthdays, first steps, milestones that don't wait for family drama to resolve itself. And from Brooklyn's perspective, that permanence is exactly the point. In his previous statements, he's made it clear that his future family will be shaped differently from the one he grew up in. He's spoken about anxiety, pressure and feeling controlled, and about how stepping away from that environment brought relief. So when he talks about adoption, it's not framed as defiance, it's framed as alignment, a shared value between him and Nicola that reflects who they want to be as parents. Nicola, for her part, has been open in the past about wanting a big family, but on her own timeline and terms. With her current acting commitments, biological children aren't immediately on the table, making adoption not just meaningful, but practical. And that practicality underscores just how serious these discussions are. This isn't a vague dream whispered in private. It's a plan that's been thought through, which is why the silence from David and Victoria has been so noticeable. They haven't commented publicly. They haven't responded directly. Instead, what's emerged are small symbolic moments, gestures that suggest coping rather than confronting. David's quiet lunch with his mum and sister wasn't flashy. It wasn't strategic, but it was grounding. A reminder of where he came from and who remains close when things fall apart. Sandra Beckham, in particular, has always been a stabilising presence in David's life, and in moments of emotional strain, returning to that core seems intentional. At the same time, Victoria has continued to move forward professionally, leaning into work and visibility. To some, it looks like resilience. To others, avoidance. But either way, it reflects a family choosing motion over stagnation. Inside the Beckham household, attention has increasingly shifted to the children who are still present, especially Cruz. Cruz's provocative music promo didn't just stir social media reactions. It also reinforced a narrative that the rest of the family is carrying on, loudly and unapologetically. For supporters of Brooklyn, this plays directly into his claims that image and brand come first. For supporters of David and Victoria, it's simply parents backing a son who still wants their support. And somewhere between those interpretations lies the truth. Romeo's playful reaction to Cruz's post added another layer, showing warmth, humour and unity among the siblings who remain connected. It's the kind of casual interaction that Brooklyn has been absent from for months, which only makes Brooklyn's tattoo removals feel even heavier. Because tattoos aren't impulsive for him, they never have been. His body has always told a story of loyalty, love and identity. So when he chooses to erase those chapters, it signals a conscious decision to redefine who he is without the Beckham family name at the centre. What he keeps speaks volumes. Nicola's name, Nicola's face, Nicola's symbols. She is the constant, she is the anchor. And from Nicola's side, that support appears unwavering. Her sister's cryptic post wasn't defensive, it wasn't aggressive, it was quietly affirming, suggesting belief, trust and purpose. In a situation filled with tension, it read like reassurance. The Peltz family, unlike the Beckhams, has stayed mostly out of the spotlight during this feud. That contrast hasn't gone unnoticed. Brooklyn has previously praised his in-laws for offering a sense of calm and acceptance, as something he's implied was missing elsewhere. Whether fair or not, that perception shapes how he moves forward. And that brings us to the quietest, yet arguably most important figure in this entire saga. Behind the scenes, there is reportedly one Beckham family member who has refused to pick sides, someone who still speaks to everyone, someone who believes that no matter how fractured things seem, family shouldn't be written off completely. This person hasn't posted statements, hasn't hinted on social media, hasn't tried to sway public opinion. Instead, they've focused on maintaining lines of communication carefully, privately, and without pressure. It's a role that requires restraint and patience, because any misstep could make things worse. So far, those efforts haven't led to reconciliation. Brooklyn remains firm in his stance. David and Victoria remain heartbroken but restrained. And Nicola remains the emotional centre of Brooklyn's world. But the existence of that bridge, however fragile, means the story isn't over. Not yet. Still, time is not neutral in situations like this. If Brooklyn and Nicola move forward with adoption, that timeline accelerates everything. Decisions that once felt theoretical become immediate. Emotions that could be postponed come crashing forward. Will David and Victoria be informed privately? Or will they learn through headlines and social media like everyone else? Will there be a softening once a child is involved? Or will boundaries harden even further? And perhaps the most painful question of all, will a future grandchild ever know the Beckham grandparents at all? For now, there are no answers, only signals. Brooklyn looking ahead, David looking inward, Nicola standing firm, and a family caught between past wounds and future realities. What began as a personal rift has now evolved into something much bigger. A story about legacy, control, independence, and what it really means to build a family on your own terms. And as this feud continues to unfold, one thing is clear. Once children enter the picture, nothing stays theoretical. Everything becomes real. And whatever happens next will change the Beckham family forever.